Tales of Kenzera ZAU is a side-scrolling Metroidvania game that has you venture through the beautiful world of Kenzera as you attempt to help 3 angered great spirits in exchange for your father's soul. You play as ZAU, a young adult shaman who recently lost his father, who was another shaman, as he travels through various parts of Kenzera. ZAU teams up with the god of death, named Kalunga, during their hunt for these great spirits. ZAU and Kalunga meet several interesting characters along the way, each with their own connection to the great spirits. And throughout the journey, ZAU and Kalunga use ZAU's shaman powers to help resolve their own conflicts with death. After several ups and downs between the relationship, ZAU and Kalunga successfully pacify the 3 great spirits, and ZAU requests Kalunga, the god of death, to uphold his end of the bargain in bringing back his father's spirit. And that's at the end of the game. Now, for my discussion with Tales of Kenzera, I feel like it's going to be mostly a summary of the majority of the narrative plots of this game, but through ZAU's journey, I feel like gives a lot of in-depth examples of coping with grief and loss, and it just really moved me to see ZAU's reactions and how he was dealing with a lot of stuff, and I don't know, just wanted to talk about it. So, on our way to assist Impundulu, we meet Liana, who is a young spirit caller who has a connection to Impundulu. She says they used to play together, but then this storm grew, and now Liana's been looking for Impundulu, and they no longer play anymore. But we venture through the mountains and work our way up to the top where Impundulu is waiting for us. And there, on the way up to the top of the mountain, we chat with Liana. And before we fight Impundulu, it is revealed that she is actually Liana's mother. Impundulu is holding on to the past, unable to let go and cross over. So she needs to allow Liana to inherit the responsibilities as the new ruler of the skies, but she is holding on to that, and she doesn't want to put that burden on her daughter. And just as a quick side note, it feels like a lot of these boss fights in the game are, symbolic, because, you're a shaman, and you're fighting the boss as if they're attacking you, but it feels more like a battle of the emotions and of whatever conflict is arising. So you're really fighting them and doing therapy with them, where you're trying to resolve that conflict and allowing them to open up to whatever it is that you have to offer them so that they can resolve whatever issue that's keeping them there, and then their spirit can pass. So after beating Impundulu and helping her cross into the afterlife, ZAU reflects on his own situation of not wanting to let his Baba go, and how he also had to inherit his father's own responsibilities. So he wasn't expecting his father to die so suddenly, and now all of a sudden he's a shaman that Kenzera needs. So he now has this responsibility, just like Liana now has the responsibility to be the ruler of the sky and the spirit of the sky. So with Impundulu, we see this loss of a parent and how that affects the child. After Impundulu, ZAU and Kalunga continue on to the next great spirit, who resides in the forest. Once they make their way there, they encounter Sabulana, an old friend of ZAU's, who also knew ZAU's Baba. So she instantly recognizes ZAU's shaman mask as previously belonging to Baba, and realizes that must mean that Baba is dead. So unfortunately, Sabulana informs us that she is also sick and dying, and she wants ZAU to save the forest, which is, at this point in the game, diseased. She mentions that there is a potion that can be brewed out of the various herbs found within this forest, and if we get to them to her, it might actually cure her. So shortly after leaving to find the herbs, Kalunga confesses that maybe ZAU should not waste time searching for these herbs, and instead should just spend the remaining moments of Sabulana's life together, instead of leaving her to try and find this cure. ZAU eventually becomes frustrated with Kalunga's remarks, believing that Kalunga would rather do nothing than save his friend. And then ZAU continues to press the matter by saying that Kalunga does not care about humans and only sees them as inconveniences. So Kalunga is kind of rightfully becoming a bit defensive at this, but he kind of backs down. He sees that ZAU is really frustrated, angry, and upset. ZAU just lost his Baba, and now he might lose his own friend. So he kind of quiets down and just lets ZAU get it out of the system. But this affected ZAU so greatly because he felt helplessness in his Baba's situation. He couldn't help his dad. I think he got sick pretty suddenly, and I think they knew he was going to die soon, but it was still the sickness came on quickly to the point where he didn't have a lot of time left with him. And he sees this opportunity to actually prevent someone else's death. So he wants to do whatever he can to prevent that death. And he sees Kalunga as like a threat to that. And that's why he's like becoming hostile with Kalunga. But fortunately, ZAU's frustration turns into grief when he returns to Sabulana with the ingredients, gives her the potion, but is unable to save her because she technically died before any of this actually occurred. This was actually the angered great spirit of the forest, Kiki Yaon, who was playing a trick on ZAU. I'm not 100% sure why, but wanted to get him away, and the great spirit was physically presenting as his sick friend who had already died. Symbolically, I interpreted this as Sabulana had died some time ago when she was probably first hit with the disease. And, you know, this might be a bit iffy, but she probably came to terms with her own death and wanted to send ZAU away so that he would not see her die. And the reason I say this is iffy, because in the game they explain it as Kiki Yaon was pretending to be Sabulana, but feels like symbolically and narratively it was still actually her just wanting ZAU to not watch her die and maybe give ZAU a purpose. So when Sabulana turns into Kiki Yaon, we see that boss kind of like a manifestation of ZAU's frustration and being able to help, and kind of feeds off of that, and that turns into the boss fight. After helping out and pacifying Kiki Yaon, ZAU and Kalunga then make their way to the third and final great spirit of the volcano, which resides in Mount Ichoka. ZAU feels a special connection to the area of Ichoka since his mother was actually from there, but she left ZAU and Baba when ZAU was just a child to return to Ichoka. ZAU took a while to let go of his mother, but he realized there was no reason to hold on to that pain. But Baba did struggle to get over the mom leaving them for the world. So close to Mount Ichoka, ZAU and Kalunga run into Bomani, who is an older man who is waiting for his son to return. His son went to do the Enduring Rite, which is a ceremony to ask a favor from the gods, and this occurs deep within the volcano. It seemed to me that there was some bad blood, maybe a fight that occurred between Bomani and his son, and that is why he wanted to get his son back. But I think his son went there he needed a favor from the gods in order to maybe like save the village. I forget the specifics, but Bomani was like, don't do it, it's too dangerous. But his son didn't listen. So during the ascent to the volcano, we find Bomani's son's shattered mask, abandoned spear, and a necklace on top of a stick and a pile of rocks. Kind of looks like a gravesite. This does not bode well, and seems like something might have happened to the son since his belongings are just like kind of scattered together in this area. But we eventually reach the top and then descend into the volcano, only to be met with the great spirit of mankind, Gogorib. ZAU mentions that they are looking for the son of Bomani, but this angers Gogorib. ZAU continues by saying that within the child bears the burden of mankind, and the father wants to release this burden. And this quote like really stood out to me, because it felt like the wisest thing ZAU had said at that moment. I initially interpreted the quote as every child is going to grow up to support mankind in some way, that all of mankind relies on these children to contribute to society as adults in a way that's going to help support the society. But I'm not too sure what was meant by the father saying he wishes to release that burden from the child. Maybe it could be that the father wanted to shield the child from the burden of having to support society. But in this case with Bomani, he's no longer going to be able to support him since his son is dead and is, in fact, this raging spirit now named Gogorib. During the fight, Gogorib exclaims that no father would want this kind of son. And, you know, maybe this comes from the shame that he felt being Bomani's child. Maybe they didn't always have the same outlook on life and fought, and now maybe he died with regret. Not too sure also what was meant by that, but during the fight, it eventually leads back out from the depth of the volcano into the surface, because ZAU is being chased by Gogorib, and he somehow got trapped on the side of the mountain, and Bomani was there waiting. And Bomani just sees his son in his current form. And I think Bomani still is like trying to comfort his son, saying there is no shame in the way parents and children fight, and time is what wore him down. Bomani just wants for him to be at peace. So ZAU and Kalunga then leave to the realm of the dead now that the three spirits have been pacified, so Kalunga can uphold his end of the bargain and return his Baba's spirit. So after traveling through the realm, ZAU and Kalunga stare at a tree in the distance, and Kalunga says his heart beats with his ancestors now. Then asks ZAU if he's ready to perform his shamanly duties as you're staring at this tree. So Kalunga then reveals that he is actually ZAU's father. He's been posing as the god of death, and he wanted to accompany ZAU during this whole journey of this game to teach him some final lessons about life, about being a shaman, and about dealing with grief and loss. So, ZAU was in denial about his father's death, and maybe that's why he didn't recognize him traveling with him the whole time. I'm not 100% sure on that either, but the final fight was pretty interesting because it brought in pieces of all the previous boss fights, which I feel like furthers this message that Kalungo is trying to reflect and reinforce the lessons on life and shamanism that ZAU learned throughout every other boss fight. And now it's this chance to apply these life lessons. But once you beat him, Baba drops, and then ZAU runs to embrace him. So Baba remarks on how hard-headed and arrogant ZAU is to believe he could even barter with the god of death himself. And then ZAU asks if Baba is proud of him, and he had such sorrow in his voice, just instantly got to me. It felt a bit relatable, just of wanting that validation. You want someone like your parents to be proud of you, and you could hear that in ZAU's voice. Thankfully, Baba says he's always been proud. ZAU apologizes for feeling angry and scared, and Baba says that healing can only begin once we accept and allow our emotions to flow, so we can't hide or ignore them. And that's what ZAU was doing with his anger. He was letting him flow. He was processing the death and grief in his own way. ZAU couldn't save Baba from his fate, but he did save many other people from their own fates, or at least being fixated on their loved ones' deaths. So they say I love you to each other. ZAU performs a ritual as Baba then crosses over to the afterlife. And that's pretty much the end of the game. So it seems like within the game, we can see how each character has their own coping strategy and are affected by the death. Liana with searching for that parental figure and then having to step up into the role that her previous mom has held. But ZAU also with doing everything he can to help prevent the death of another loved one, his friend, Sabulana. And then Bomani with regret and wanting to make amends with his son because they left on not very good terms. So overall, this game was heavily emotional. I was so grateful to go on that journey. I love being able to play a game that could make me feel a negative emotion because it feels pretty easy to feel a positive emotion about video games a lot of times. Whenever a game is able to bring me to some different headspace, I'm definitely grateful for that, and I appreciate being there, even if it does take me in a little too deep sometimes. This game in general just hit me very hard. Death has been a little common in the past few years, so having to deal with grief and loss of a loved one has been on the forefront of my mind. So to see a game take this and do it in a very beautiful, artistic way really touched me. I was so grateful for this. That's Tales of Kenzera. I really like this game.